Breaking news in the murders of 4 college students in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night and she's not waking up.
That was the call. It came in just before noon on November 13th, 2022. The voice on the other end is frantic, confused. The phone gets passed around.
Hello? Okay, I need someone to stop passing the phone around because I've talked to 4 different people.
On the surface, it sounded like a typical Sunday morning in a college town, a party house, a student who had too much to drink. But you need to listen closer. Buried in the chaos is something much more terrifying.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Yeah.
That detail gets lost. The dispatcher is focused on the immediate medical emergency. Is she breathing? The answer is a quiet, chilling no. Police arrive at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. It's a 3-story rental home, just a short walk from the University of Idaho campus. They're expecting to find a medical situation, maybe an alcohol poisoning case. What they found was a slaughterhouse. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? What city are you in? And what's the time and weather like where you are right now? It's always interesting to hear how this story reaches people all over the world. I'm really happy you're here with me. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new stories. The officers walk in, and the scene is so horrific, it's almost impossible to process. On the 2nd floor, they find the body of 20-year-old Xana Kernodle. Lying right next to her is her boyfriend, 20-year-old Ethan Chapin. Both had been stabbed to death, but it doesn't stop there. They move to the 3rd floor, and in one bedroom, they find 2 more victims, 21-year-old Madison Mogan and her best friend, 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves. They were in the same bed. They had been killed as they slept. 4 students, 4 lives, just gone. All victims of a brutal, vicious knife attack. How could this happen? This wasn't a big city. This was Moscow, Idaho, a town that hadn't seen a murder in 7 years. The initial 911 call was for 1 unconscious person, but the reality was 4 people were dead. They had been for hours. The initial report was a mistake, born from shock and utter disbelief. But then, police learned something that makes the entire situation even more baffling. 2 other roommates were in the house the entire night, on the 1st floor, and they survived. They slept through a quadruple homicide happening just 1 floor above them. Or did they? The community was instantly terrified. Was this a targeted attack? Was it a random home invasion? Was the killer still out there, watching? Parents rushed to campus to pull their kids out of school. Students barricaded themselves in their dorms. Think about it. You go to sleep in your own bed, in a house full of your best friends, and in the morning, half of them are gone. As investigators swarmed the house on King Road, they were facing a nightmare scenario. No forced entry, no obvious motive, no murder weapon. And as night fell on that small Idaho town, the chilling reality set in. They had a monster on the loose, and they had absolutely no idea who they were looking for. 2 people made it out of the King Road house alive. Their names were Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke. They were the other roommates, living on the 1st floor, and they were the only key police had to unlocking this nightmare. Investigators separated them immediately. What did they see? What did they hear? Bethany Funke told police she heard something, but she was in her room and didn't see anything. But Dylan's story was different. Her statement, detailed in court documents, is the closest thing we have to a witness account of the terror inside that house. She told police she was woken up around 4 a.m. She heard what she thought was Kaylee Goncalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. A short time later, she heard something else, a voice she thought was Kaylee's saying something like, "There's someone here." But then she heard crying. It was coming from Xana Kernodle's room, and then she heard a man's voice. He said something chillingly gentle. "It's okay. I'm going to help you." This is the point where every single one of us asks the same question. What would you do? You're in your bed. It's 4 in the morning. You hear strange noises. A man's voice. Do you get up? Do you call the police? Dylan opened her door. She looked out into the hallway. Nothing. She opened it a second time. More crying. And then she opened her door a third time. And that's when she saw him. A figure, clad in black clothing and a mask that covered his mouth and nose. He wasn't tall. He wasn't short. He was about 5'10", athletically built but not muscular. Just a man. And he walked right past her. She described him as having bushy eyebrows. He walked past her door, towards the back sliding glass door of the house, and she just stood there, frozen. She told investigators she was in a state of frozen shock. She didn't understand what she was seeing. She locked her door, and she didn't come out again until the next morning. The inaction is hard to understand, but the psychology of terror is a powerful, paralyzing thing. So now police had a description, a ghost in the night. But that's all they had. They had no name, no murder weapon, despite searching every inch of that house. And most importantly, they had no motive. Why these 4 students? Was it a robbery gone wrong? A crime of passion? A random thrill kill? The public was demanding answers, but the Moscow Police Department had none. They were a small-town force suddenly at the center of the biggest murder case in the country. The pressure was unimaginable. For weeks, the case felt frozen, just like Dylan on that night. No new leads, no suspects. Just a terrifying story of a masked man with bushy eyebrows who disappeared into the Idaho darkness. But investigators did have one thing, a faint image on a grainy security camera that would blow this case wide open. The ghost in the night made a mistake. He didn't leave a weapon. He didn't leave a fingerprint. But he left a shadow, a flicker of white on a grainy security camera. Investigators, desperate for any lead, started pulling footage from every camera in the neighborhood surrounding 1122 King Road. And on a camera just down the street, they found it. A white sedan. It wasn't just driving by, it was circling. The footage showed the car passing the victim's home 3 times starting at 3:29 a.m. On the 4th pass, it stopped. The car stayed in the area for nearly an hour, and then, at 4:20 a.m., it was seen speeding away from the King Road area at a high rate of speed. The timing was perfect. It matched Dylan Mortenson's account almost to the minute. This was their killer's car. But what was it? Police initially put out a general, "Bolo, be on the lookout for a white sedan." Think about that for a second. How many white cars are there in a college town, let alone the entire region? It was a needle in a haystack. So, they brought in the FBI. An expert analyst pored over the blurry footage, frame by frame, and they came back with a make and model. A 2011 to 2016 white Hyundai Elantra. Now, they had something real. Investigators immediately ran a search. They were looking for anyone who registered a car like that in the Moscow, Idaho, and Pullman, Washington area. Why Pullman? Because it's home to Washington State University, just a 15-minute drive away. On November 29th, a campus police officer at WSU ran a query. He was looking for white Elantras registered to students or staff. He got a hit. A 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, registered to a PhD student named Brian Christopher Koberger. Suddenly, they had a name. They pulled his driver's license photo. Bushy eyebrows. It matched Dylan's description. The pieces were starting to snap into place. But here's where the investigation goes from a lucky break to something truly terrifying. They got a warrant for his cell phone records, and what they found painted a picture not of a random attack, but of a calculated, obsessive hunt. Kohberger's phone hadn't just been in the area on the night of the murders. His phone pinged off cell towers near the King Road house at least 12 separate times in the months leading up to the attack. Most of these pings were late at night or in the very early hours of the morning. It looked like stalking. He was allegedly watching them, learning their routines, waiting. And then there's the night of the murders. The data shows his phone leaving his apartment in Pullman, Washington at 2:47 a.m. It travels towards Moscow. And then, just before the attack, it goes dark. It stops reporting to the network. An obvious attempt, prosecutors say, to hide his location. The phone turns back on at 4:48 a.m. south of Moscow, on a highway heading back towards Pullman. They had the car. They had the phone data. They had a pattern. They had a name. The ghost now had a face. But who was this man? Who was the PhD student who allegedly used his knowledge to plan the perfect murder? The man in the white Elantra wasn't some drifter. He wasn't a local addict. The man police now believed was the killer from King Road was a PhD student. And he wasn't studying history or engineering. He was studying criminology. His name was Brian Kohberger, 28 years old. And on paper, his life seemed dedicated to understanding the criminal mind, not acting on it. He had a master's degree in criminal justice from DeSales University. He had even worked with a professor on a research project asking former criminals why they committed their crimes and how they chose their targets. Think about that. He was studying the very thought process that goes into a violent attack. At the time of the murders, he had just moved to Pullman, Washington, to start his PhD program at Washington State University. He was one of their top applicants. He was studying side by side with people who would go on to become police officers, federal agents, and crime analysts. He was learning about police procedure, forensic science, and legal loopholes. He was, in essence, being taught how to solve the exact kind of crime he is now accused of committing. The audacity is almost unbelievable. Could he have thought he could use his academic knowledge to plan the perfect crime? As investigators in Idaho were building their case, Kohberger finished his semester at WSU. And then, he did something incredibly bold. He got in his white Hyundai Elantra and started driving cross-country. With his own father in the passenger seat, they were heading home to Pennsylvania for the holidays. And on that drive, they got pulled over. Twice.
Hello. How you doing? How y'all doing today? Good, good. Take a look at your driver's license real quick if I could. See, he's right up on that van, man. He was right up on the back end of that van. Pulled you over for tailgating.
This is police body cam footage from a traffic stop in Indiana on December 15th. That's Kohberger behind the wheel. The officer is calm, professional. It's a routine stop for tailgating.
Is this your car? Okay, cool. Where are you headed?
Well, we're coming from WSU, and we're standing early.
What's WSU? So we're, okay, I'm having a hard time hearing you because of the traffic. So you're coming from Washington State University? Yeah. And you're going where? Oh.
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're slightly punchy because we're driving for hours.
Hours, days.
Hours with driving. Well,
Yeah. Okay. And what
Listen to how calm he is, talking to a police officer. Just weeks after he allegedly committed a quadruple homicide, his father is sitting right there. The car they are in is the exact car police across the country are desperately searching for. But at this point, the bolo hadn't been shared that widely. The officer had no idea who he had just pulled over. He lets them go with a warning. Koberger made it home to Pennsylvania. He spent Christmas with his family. He acted like nothing was wrong. To the world, he was just a brilliant student home for the holidays. But the net was closing. Police had the car. They had the cell phone data that showed him allegedly stalking the house. They had a physical description that matched. They had a powerful circumstantial case. But they knew it wasn't enough. A good lawyer could punch holes in all of it. They needed something physical, something that couldn't be explained away. They needed to place Bryan Koberger inside that house. And to do that, they needed his DNA. The biggest break in the case wasn't found in a security video or a cell tower log. It was found in the bed, lying next to the bodies of Madison, Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves. It was a single item the killer had left behind in his haste. A tan leather knife sheath. On the sheath was a button snap, and on that snap, investigators found a tiny speck of biological material, a single source of male DNA. It was too small to run through CODIS, the National DNA database. But it was everything. If they could match this DNA to a suspect, the case would be locked. This was the physical evidence they desperately needed. So, while Bryan Koberger was at home in Pennsylvania with his family, the FBI was watching him. An elite surveillance team tracked his every move. But they didn't just watch him. They watched his house. They watched his parents. And most importantly, they watched his trash. On December 27, 2022, law enforcement in Pennsylvania collected the garbage from the Koberger family home. It was a high-stakes gamble. They sifted through bags of holiday waste, looking for anything that might have Bryan Koberger's DNA on it. A used tissue, a water bottle, a discarded razor. They found what they were looking for. They sent the sample to the Idaho State Laboratory. The lab technicians then performed what's called a familial DNA comparison. They weren't looking for a direct match to Bryan, but to a close relative. The DNA from the trash came back as a near-certain match for the father of the person who left their DNA on the knife sheath. They had him. The DNA on the sheath wasn't a random person's. It wasn't contamination from a first responder. Based on the trash pull, police were now almost certain it belonged to Bryan Koberger. The criminology student who studied murder had allegedly left his genetic signature at the scene of the crime. Think about the irony. A man who allegedly planned everything stalking patterns, disabling his phone, wearing a mask, was brought down by a tiny detail. A single speck of DNA on the snap of a knife sheath he dropped. The evidence was now overwhelming. The car, the phone, the physical description, and now, the DNA. On December 29, 2022, an arrest warrant was issued for Bryan Christopher Koberger for 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. In the pre-dawn hours of December 30th, the quiet neighborhood in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania was shattered by the sound of flashbangs and police commands. A Pennsylvania State Police SWAT team swarmed the Koberger family home. They smashed through the door and windows. And when they burst into the house, they came face to face with the man who had been a ghost for 47 days. The man they found inside was Bryan Koberger. He was taken into custody without a fight. The ghost of King Road was finally caught. He waived his right to an extradition hearing, agreeing to be transported back to Idaho to face the charges. During the flight, law enforcement officers who were with him described his behavior as calm, even chatty. He reportedly asked if anyone else had been arrested. He was curious about the case, like an academic studying a puzzle. Back in Idaho, the charges were read. 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of felony burglary. The punishment for a conviction could be death. When asked for his plea, Bryan Koberger stood before the court and said 2 words, not guilty. So, what happens now? The case against him, as we know it from court documents, is built on three powerful pillars. Pillar 1, the car. His white Hyundai Elantra, seen circling the house just before the murders and speeding away just after. Pillar 2, the phone. The cell phone data that allegedly shows him stalking the victim's home for months, turning his phone off during the attack, and then traveling back to his apartment. Pillar 3, the DNA. The most damning piece of evidence. The DNA found on the knife sheath left in the bed with two of the victims, which prosecutors say is a statistical match to him. What could the defense possibly say? His lawyers have presented an alibi. They claim that Bryan Kohberger was not at the King Road house on the night of the murders. They say he was out driving, alone, as he often did, late at night. They are challenging the DNA evidence, the cell phone data, and the very foundation of the state's case. The trial will be a battle of forensics, technology, and testimony. But even with a mountain of evidence, there is one huge, gaping hole at the center of this story. One question that investigators have never been able to answer. Why? Why these four students? Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. Was there a connection? Did he know them? Investigators have scoured social media and interviewed hundreds of people. To date, they have found no definitive link between Bryan Kohberger and any of the four victims. So what was the motive? What turns a man studying the minds of killers into an alleged killer himself? Was this a twisted academic fantasy? A crime born from social isolation and rage? Or something so random and terrifying it defies all explanation? That is the one question that hangs over this entire case. The car, the phone, the DNA, that's the how. But no one, perhaps except for Bryan Kohberger himself, knows the why.
An 18-year-old Michigan man has been charged in the connection with the slayings of 3 members of Detroit's LGBTQ community.
And you can see kind of what's going on here. So this home that is surrounded by crime tape, this is where the shooting occurred. And as you mentioned, 3 people are dead. 2.
The night of May 25, 2019, was supposed to be a celebration. On Devonshire Road, a quiet residential street on Detroit's east side, a small house party was underway. The home, belonging to a man named Lance Atterbury, was filled with music and laughter. But just before 5:00 a.m., the sounds of celebration were violently replaced by the sounds of chaos and desperation, captured in a series of frantic calls to 911 dispatchers. The first call came from a man, his voice strained with panic and disbelief.
Can you please have somebody come to this?
What's the address, ma'am? What's the street name?
That's the side.
What's going on at the location, ma'am?
No, I'm a gay male. I apologize.
That's okay.
Somebody just came in and shot up the house. And 2 of my friends are fatally wounded. It is their desire.
Okay, can you sir, I'm requesting you to the location now. Are there any injuries?
There are serious injuries that you can get right here as soon as possible. Please, please.
I'm requesting, did you see who did the shooting?
So,
The caller was Blair Keys, one of the partygoers. His plea for help was echoed by another survivor inside the house, Armand Matthews, whose call captured the raw terror of the moment.
911 was inside the emergency.
could I want my police get emergency? Somebody just came in and shot my friends. Okay. And they were like, please, an emergency. I'm like, I was on, I was broke. Oh my God.
When Detroit Police Department officers arrived at 19,136 Devonshire Road, they were met with a scene of profound violence. The small, single-story brick home was now a crime scene. Inside, they found 2 victims who had succumbed to gunshot wounds. One was lying on the living room couch. the other in a chair. A third victim was discovered on the front driveway. It was a brutal and bloody tableau that offered few immediate answers. The initial assessment by responding officers noted signs of a possible forced entry through a basement window, but the true sequence of events was still shrouded in confusion. The deceased were quickly identified. They were 20-year-old Timothy Blanchard, known to friends as Miami, 21-year-old Alante Davis, who went by Tay, and 20-year-old Paris Cameron. The two survivors, Blair Keys and Armand Matthews, were physically unharmed but deeply traumatized. They provided the first crucial details to investigators: a party, a gathering of friends, and then a sudden, masked intruder who opened fire. But who was this shooter, and why had this night of celebration ended in a triple homicide? For the investigators just arriving on the scene, this was the central, urgent question that demanded an answer. Before the house on Devonshire Road became a crime scene, it was a space of fellowship for a group of friends navigating life in Detroit. To comprehend the full weight of the events of May 25, it is essential to understand the three individuals whose lives were taken. They were not simply victims. They were vibrant young people with families, dreams, and a community that cherished them. Paris Cameron, 20, was a magnetic presence. A transgender woman of color, she was described by her mother and friends as a beacon of positivity and strength. Paris was an aspiring model and a poet, using her creativity to express herself. She was also a prominent and beloved figure in Detroit's ballroom scene, a vital cultural space that provides community, competition, and a chosen family for many in the LGBTQ+ community. Friends recalled her as a protector, someone who was always willing to stand up for others, and whose laughter could fill a room. Her loss was not just a private family tragedy, but a public blow to a community that looked to her as an inspiration. Alante Tay Davis, 21, was a high school graduate with his future ahead of him. He was a gay man, and like Paris, had found a strong sense of belonging within his circle of friends. He and Timothy Blanchard were inseparable, their bond a constant in the lives of those around them. Friends remember Alante for his loyalty and his quiet but steadfast presence. He was part of the essential support system that this group provided for one another, navigating the world as young, openly LGBTQ+ individuals. Timothy Blanchard, 20, was known to his friends as Miami. He was a gay man whose personality was often described as fun-loving and outgoing. He and Alante were a pair, a familiar sight together within their community. His nickname reflected an energy that drew people to him. Like Paris and Alante, he was at a point of transition, moving from youth into adulthood, relying on the solidarity of his friends as he forged his path. These were not three strangers who happened to be at the same party. They were a family, bound by friendship and shared experience. They represented a specific and often vulnerable segment of the community, and the space where they gathered was meant to be a sanctuary from a world that could be hostile. The violence that erupted on Devonshire Road didn't just end 3 lives. It attacked the very fabric of that sanctuary. The crucial question for investigators was how this circle of friendship came to intersect with the man who would ultimately end their lives. The gathering at 19,136 Devonshire Road on the night of May 24th into the early morning of the 25th was, by all accounts, unremarkable in its beginnings. The homeowner, Lance Atterbury, and his boyfriend, Brendan Suttle, were hosting a small group of friends. Among them were Paris Cameron, Alante Tay Davis, and Timothy Miami Blanchard. Survivors Blair Keys and Armand Matthews were also present. Joining the group was an 18-year-old named Devin Robinson. The atmosphere was celebratory and relaxed, with guests drinking and socializing. It was a typical get-together for this close-knit circle, a safe space for members of Detroit's LGBTQ+ community. Testimony from survivors would later piece together the sequence of events that unfolded within the small brick house. Devin Robinson was not an outsider. He was part of the social fabric of the evening. As the night progressed and inhibitions lowered, Robinson engaged in an intimate, sexual act with another man at the party. This event, which might have remained a private matter between two individuals, became the core of the prosecution's case. What happened in the moments immediately following that interaction that would lead to such a catastrophic outcome? According to witnesses, Robinson's entire demeanor shifted. The celebratory mood he had shared with the others evaporated and was replaced by visible anxiety and panic. He began to express intense fear, not about the act itself, but about the possibility of exposure. He was overheard worrying about what people would say, and that his sexuality would become public knowledge. This fear appeared to be directed specifically at his family. He allegedly made it clear that his participation in the LGBTQ+ social scene was a secret, something he kept on the down low. The party, which had been a space of acceptance for everyone else, suddenly seemed to represent a profound threat to the life Robinson had carefully constructed. His agitation grew until he abruptly left the house. To the friends he left behind, his departure might have seemed sudden or attributable to the alcohol consumed that night. No one voiced suspicion that his distress was a prelude to violence. They believed he had simply gone home. The party continued, its attendees unaware that Devin Robinson was not ending his night. Instead, he was setting in motion a plan that would bring him back to Devonshire Road with fatal intent. In the initial hours of the investigation at 19,136 Devonshire Road, detectives from the Detroit Police Department faced a daunting challenge. The shooter had worn a mask, obscuring his identity from the terrified survivors. With no immediate suspect and a scene of immense violence, investigators began the methodical process of searching for any piece of evidence that could provide a lead. They found it not in a weapon or a fingerprint, but on a small, discarded piece of paper, a time-stamped receipt from a nearby gas station. This receipt would become the first link in a chain of evidence that would expose the killer. The receipt led detectives to a Sunoco gas station just a short drive from the crime scene. They secured the surveillance footage from the time printed on the receipt, which was shortly after witnesses said Devin Robinson had stormed out of the party. The video confirmed their first break. It showed Robinson at the station, his car, and his clothing, providing a clear image of him and a precise timeline of his location after leaving Devonshire Road. With this verified starting point, the investigation expanded. Detectives utilized Detroit's extensive public and private surveillance camera network, a system known as Project Green Light, to follow Robinson's movements. The trail of digital evidence was meticulous and damning. Camera by camera, investigators tracked the path of Robinson's vehicle from the gas station directly to the address of his mother's home. The footage then captured the most critical sequence of the entire investigation. After a short period inside the residence, the cameras showed a figure emerging from the house. The person was wearing different clothing and, crucially, a mask. This masked individual got into the same car Robinson had been driving and traveled directly back toward Devonshire Road. The timeline established by the video recordings was precise, tracking the masked figure to the immediate vicinity of the crime scene just moments before the first frantic 911 calls were made. The police later described the comprehensiveness of this evidence directly to Robinson.
And when you go home, what do you do? You take a shower and go to sleep. Take a shower and go to sleep. You at home that whole time, right? Yes. Till what time? Until like 11 o'clock. A.M. Next one. Because we have videos of you going in the house and coming right back out shortly afterwards and going back to that house. Okay, we have videos of that. Because you just told me you left out at 11 o'clock, but that's not true. Right. We have actual videos. So either you forgot or you lying to me. Which one is it? I didn't forget. I think I'm sorry. I'll tell you correctly. Well, you did, because we have your video coming out. Going back to the house. So I didn't. How you gonna make me?
Cameras everywhere we go. We had cameras everywhere.
Right.
It's traction.
Right.
Boom, boom, boom. We can piece all that together.
Right.
No bullshit.
I'm listening to you.
I need you to hear me. If you're listening, no, right. So I'm just saying, I'm just memory loss or whatever the case may be. I'm telling you what we tracked on video. Not just tracking from a dog. Which we can do that, we did that as well. Boom, boom, boom. In the house. Running. That's a fact.
Further investigation uncovered another disturbing detail. Just 2 days before the party, on May 22, 2019, Devin Robinson, at only 18 years old, had legally purchased a .40 caliber pistol, the same caliber used in the triple murder. The visual timeline constructed from surveillance footage, combined with the evidence of the firearm purchase, created an undeniable narrative. Investigators now had a clear picture. Robinson left the party in distress, drove home, changed his appearance, armed himself, and returned to execute the 3 victims. With this airtight case built on technology and methodical police work, authorities moved in and arrested Devin Robinson. They had tracked the ghost on camera. Now, they had to understand the mind of the man behind the mask. After his arrest, Devin Robinson was brought to a Detroit police homicide unit and placed in an interrogation room. These rooms are designed to be sterile and psychologically imposing environments, free from distraction. For Robinson, it was here, under the intense pressure of experienced detectives, that the carefully constructed walls around his secret life would begin to crumble. The investigators entered the room with a significant advantage. They already had a mountain of digital evidence tracking his every move. Their objective was not just to confirm what he did, but to get him to explain why he did it. The detectives began by laying out the certainty of their case, attempting to bypass outright denial and move directly to the motive. They presented a mixture of authority and calculated empathy, suggesting they understood that something must have provoked him.
I don't want you to say anything right now, but we know that you're responsible for shooting. They had to secure enough to arrest you for the homicide. Now, we know some other things that happened prior to that. We know some things that they did to you that was not cool prior to that. We know that you were intoxicated prior to that. And when it took you back to the house, some other things happened. Okay. We know exactly what you did, but we want to know why you did what you did. What was your emotional state during that time? We go home and did what you did, but we both men too, and we understand we might have did the same thing. You know what I'm saying?
Initially, Robinson was evasive. He reportedly offered denials and claimed memory loss. But the detectives were persistent, steering the conversation away from the act of the shooting itself and toward the party and the secret he was so desperate to keep. They had information from witnesses about his panic after the sexual encounter, and they used it to probe the source of his fear. Was he afraid of being exposed? The conversation pivoted to the subject of his sexuality, which Robinson referred to as down low shit. This was the key. For the first time, Robinson engaged directly with the question of motive, and in doing so, made a critical admission.
That's the thing. Don't nobody know that.
Don't nobody know what?
Don't nobody down low shit.
For you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't nobody know, not even my mom.
Okay.
Not my pops, nobody.
So, okay. So don't nobody know what you down low. So, with that being said, that's the point of what we're talking about. Now, were you threatening to be exposed?
I ain't mad about. It's the thing that everybody finding out.
You don't want people to find out?
No, I'm talking about my family, like my mom and my daddy.
You don't want them to find out?
They're all these people.
That you don't want to find out? Why not?
Because I haven't told them myself.
But
I wanted to tell them before
You want to tell them what, that you done wrong?
Yeah, but can't.
You want to tell them before this stuff happened?
Yeah.
Before my son told me. I knew. I look at him. You know what I'm saying? We know our kids. You don't think you have tendencies that they don't know? Or they see people you hanging around, you don't think they know?
In that exchange, investigators believed they had their motive. It wasn't hatred of the victims for their identity, but a paralyzing fear of his own identity being revealed to his family. The alleged confession framed the triple homicide not as a crime of passion in the heat of the moment, but as a calculated act of self-preservation. It was an attempt, prosecutors would later argue, to permanently silence the three people he believed held the power to destroy his life by speaking a single truth. With this confession recorded, the case against Devin Robinson now had a powerful and tragic psychological core. As Devin Robinson sat in a Wayne County jail cell, the case against him became public knowledge. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office formally announced the charges, and news outlets began broadcasting the horrific details of the triple homicide on Devonshire Road. The identities of the victims, all members of Detroit's LGBTQ+ community, immediately raised public and official questions about the killer's motive.
An 18-year-old Michigan man has been charged in the connection with the slayings of 3 members of Detroit's LGBTQ community. Devon Robinson is facing 3 counts of first-degree murder, along with assault and weapons charges. Police say Robinson fatally shot the 3 victims last month inside a home on the city's east side. The shooting killed 21-year-old Alante Davis, 20-year-old Paris Cameron, and 20-year-old Timothy Blanchard, all of Detroit. Prosecutors say Davis and Blanchard were gay men and Cameron was a transgender woman. Investigators are still trying to determine if an exact motive for the shooting. Robinson was arraigned early Friday and remains in custody.
While the prosecution publicly built its case around a motive rooted in Robinson's fear of being outed, a different narrative was being shaped in a series of recorded jailhouse phone calls between Robinson and his mother, Mallory. These conversations reveal a desperate attempt to control the story and, specifically, to combat the hate crime label that was beginning to form. In one call, Mallory expresses her anger over the public perception of her son's sexuality and the prosecution's suspected motive.
Yeah, everybody making me mad, trying to say, you know everybody out here trying to act like you gay, right? That shit pissing me off.
And don't let me be out. It's gonna piss me all the way off.
Man, they trying to make it seem like it's a hate crime. Girl walked up to me saying she been knowing you forever.
You said girl walked up to you and said she knew me forever?
Yeah.
And she know how I am. People who know me know how I am.
She was like, I would have never thought Little Devil would have did something like that. If we had the death penalty, they would be trying to give you the death penalty, but they can't. The only thing they can do is give you a natural life in Michigan.
Damn.
So they basically trying to say because you did it because you hate gay people and all that shit. But see, that shit ain't gonna fly. You got sisters and mama that's lesbian. You feel me? You know that's not true.
Exactly.
The calls show a clear strategy taking shape to get ahead of the hate crime allegation, even if it required a stunning admission. In a subsequent conversation, Robinson informs his mother that he has taken a proactive step, directly confronting the issue with investigators in a way he believed would neutralize their theory of the case. He revealed that he had told the police the very secret he was accused of killing to protect.
If it ain't no evidence to charge me by my court date, they gotta let me go.
Not necessarily, Devin. They just can't do what they I did. Because they have nothing against him, and he pled to that shit, but you ain't got to worry about no Kobe City. You feel me? That's what he was worried about, his Kobe City.
Right. And I told the police I was gay.
Okay.
Yeah. So that should me out the window, that hate crime shit.
Mm-hmm. My thing is, if you ever felt like that way or something, don't be never afraid to come to me with that shit. Don't keep that kind of shit from me.
I'm not.
This was a significant contradiction. The prosecution's entire theory rested on the premise that Robinson's fear of his family discovering his sexuality was so profound that he resorted to murder to maintain his secret. Yet, here he was, admitting his sexuality to the very authorities investigating him, seemingly as a legal tactic. Was this a genuine, albeit delayed, acceptance of his identity? Or was it a calculated move to dismantle the prosecution's argument from the inside? As the case moved toward a trial, this central conflict, the public narrative of a hate-fueled crime versus the private strategy to defeat it, would be put to the ultimate test before a jury. The trial of Devin Robinson began in the courtroom of Wayne County Circuit Judge Dana Hathaway. The legal proceedings represented the culmination of months of police work, community grief, and private turmoil. On one side, Wayne County Assistant Prosecutor Jamie Powell Horowitz prepared to present the state's case, arguing that Robinson had meticulously planned and executed the murders of 3 people to prevent a secret from being exposed. On the other, the defense team, led by Attorney G. Gus Morris, faced the challenge of dismantling a case built on a foundation of digital evidence and the defendant's own words. The prosecution's case was presented methodically, designed to construct an unbreakable chain of events for the jury. The emotional core of their presentation came from the testimony of the 2 survivors, Blair Keys and Armand Matthews. Taking the stand, they recounted the night of the party, describing the initially joyful atmosphere that shifted dramatically after Robinson's intimate encounter with another man. They detailed his subsequent panic and his abrupt departure from the house. They then provided a terrifying first-hand account of the attack itself, a masked figure entering the home and opening fire, turning a place of sanctuary into a scene of slaughter. Following the eyewitness accounts, the prosecution laid out the physical and digital evidence. The jury was shown the trail of surveillance footage, sourced from Project Greenlight cameras and private businesses. They followed Devin Robinson from the moment he left the party, to the gas station, to his mother's home, and then tracked a masked figure leaving that same home and returning to Devonshire Road just before the murders occurred. This video timeline was the skeleton of the prosecution's case. To this, they added the evidence of the weapon. They presented records showing that Robinson, at 18, had legally purchased the .40 caliber handgun used in the killings just 2 days prior, arguing this demonstrated clear premeditation. The final, and perhaps most powerful, piece of the prosecution's case was the interrogation video. The jury watched the recording of detectives questioning Robinson. They heard him admit to living a down-low life, and they heard him state that the only people he did not want to find out about his sexuality were his parents. The prosecution argued this was a direct confession to his motive. The defense, in response, attempted to create reasonable doubt. They argued that the shooter was masked and that witness identification under such traumatic circumstances could be unreliable. They attacked the interrogation, portraying it as coercive and suggesting detectives had planted the motive in the mind of a scared teenager. They pointed to the fact that Robinson eventually told police he was gay as proof that the prosecution's theory was illogical. But the prosecution had laid out a seemingly unbreakable chain of evidence. The question now was whether the defense could find a single weak link for the jury to hold on to. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the case of the People versus Devin Robinson was handed to the jury. For the families of Paris Cameron, Alante Davis, and Timothy Blanchard, the wait for a decision was agonizing. The legal process had laid bare the painful final moments of their loved ones' lives and presented a motive born from a tragic and violent internal conflict. On March 11, 2020, the court was notified that the jury had reached a unanimous decision The courtroom was silent as the jury filed in. The foreman handed the verdict forms to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. The weight of the moment was palpable. Judge Dana Hathaway then asked the foreperson to read the verdicts aloud.
Court received a note at 10:06 a.m. indicating that the jury has reached a verdict. You bring the jury out.
All rise for the jury.
Thank you. And has the jury indeed reached a verdict?
Yes.
How do you find the defendant, Devin Robinson, as to count 1, homicide, murder, first degree, premeditated, Alante Davis?
We find the defendant guilty.
How do you find the defendant as to count 2, homicide, first degree, premeditated, Timothy Blanchard?
Guilty.
And as to count 3, homicide, first degree, premeditated, Paris Cameron?
Guilty.
As to count 4, assault with intent to murder, Clifton Blair Keys?
Guilty.
So say you, Mr. Foreperson, and all members of the jury?
Yes.
Thank you. You may be seated. Is that a good date, Attorney Callahan?
Yes.
April 10th for sentencing. The defendant is remanded.
Your Honor, I apologize if that is Passover. Could we do April 13th?
April 13th for sentencing. Does that work, Attorney Callahan?
Yes.
April 13th for sentencing. We're adjourned. Thank you.
The foreperson continued, declaring Robinson guilty on 2 counts of assault, with intent to murder for the attack on the survivors, and 1 count of felony firearm possession. He was convicted on all charges. The verdicts confirmed the prosecution's narrative that Robinson had acted with premeditation when he returned to the house on Devonshire Road. On April 13, 2020, Devin Robinson appeared for his sentencing. Given the convictions for first-degree murder in Michigan, the outcome was mandated by law. Judge Hathaway sentenced him to 3 concurrent terms of life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the state, the case was closed. Devin Robinson, now 19, would spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. Justice had been served according to the law, but what did it mean for a community still reeling from the violence? The case sent shockwaves through Detroit's LGBTQ+ population, particularly for Black members of the community. The murders were a brutal reminder of the specific dangers faced by transgender women of color, like Paris Cameron, and they highlighted the destructive potential of internalized homophobia. The motive, as presented by the prosecution, was not a simple act of hate against others, but a catastrophic act of fear. The fear of one's own identity. It was a tragedy that consumed not only the 3 vibrant young people who were killed, but also the young man who killed them. The community was left to mourn the loss and grapple with the complex, painful realities the case brought into sharp focus. In the end, there were no true winners, only the lasting absence of 3 bright lights: Paris, Alante, and Timothy.
We are following a developing story at 5. The BCA has issued an Amber Alert for a 5-year-old girl from Watkins.
In the small, quiet town of Watkins, Minnesota, the evening of Thursday, August 25, 2016, settled over the Ertl family home with a comfortable familiarity. Inside, the house was filled with the sounds of a happy family life. Matt and Kayla Ertl were enjoying a relaxed evening with their 5-year-old daughter, Elena. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? What city are you in? And what's the time and weather like where you are right now? It's always interesting to hear how this story reaches people all over the world. I'm really happy you're here with me. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new stories. A little girl known to everyone as a bright, bubbly Spitfire with an infectious laugh. They were not alone. Visiting with them was Zachary Anderson, a 26-year-old man Matt knew well. Anderson wasn't a stranger. He was a trusted coworker and a family friend. He and Matt worked together, sharing the daily grind and the easy camaraderie that comes with it. On this particular evening, Anderson had come over to the Ertls' house, and the atmosphere was light and unremarkable. He played with Elena, engaging with the 5-year-old in a way that gave her parents no cause for concern. To them, he was just a friend, spending time with their family. As the evening wore on, the conversation flowed easily. They decided Anderson would spend the night, a casual arrangement made without a second thought. He would sleep on the couch in the living room. For Matt and Kayla, this was a simple act of hospitality for a friend. There were no warning signs, no strange behaviors, and no unsettling moments to hint at the darkness lurking beneath Anderson's friendly exterior. It was, by all accounts, a completely normal night.
We're learning new details about the hours leading up to the kidnapping of Elena Erdl.
Investigators found the 5-year-old's body in a swamp not far from a cabin in Motley on Saturday afternoon. Zach Anderson, who has been charged in Elena's murder, had drinks with her parents the night before. WCCO's Jennifer Merrily takes us through the timeline of events.
Matt Erdl and Zach Anderson arrived together at Riverside Tavern in Forest City on Friday night around 10:30. They came after a softball game. The team, the River Rats, is sponsored by the bar. I'm told Matt and Zach are regulars on Friday nights after softball. On the 19th, they played the jukebox and hung out. Zach had about 2 beers in 2 hours. He paid in cash. The bar closes at 1, and that's when they left. The two had a driver. From there, the group arrived at Gordy's Bar in Watkins around 1:30, just blocks from the Erdl home. Elena's mom, Kayla, was also there. Zach bought the Erdls a beer or two. He drank vodka Red Bulls. The bar only takes cash. They joked around and told stories. Zach talked about how he loves to hunt at his family cabin, the same cabin where police later found him and discovered Elena's body. The group ordered a pizza and took it to go. The bar closed at 2. They stayed until about 2:30. According to the statement of probable cause, that's the same time Kayla Erdl moved Elena to her bedroom. That's the last time she saw her. Matt Erdl got home around 2:30. Anderson arrived between 3:30 and 3:45. He and Matt talked until about 4 in the morning, when Matt retired for the evening. By 8:30 a.m., Elena and Anderson were missing.
Around 10 p.m., with Elena tucked safely in her bed and the house beginning to quiet down, Matt and Kayla said their goodnights. They left Zachary Anderson in the living room and retreated to their own bedroom, closing the door behind them. They fell asleep with the peace of mind that comes from being in your own home, surrounded by family, with a trusted friend under the same roof. The house fell silent, holding no outward sign of the unimaginable betrayal that was about to unfold in the dark. The sun began to rise on Friday, August 26th, casting a pale light into the Erdl home. Matt Erdl woke up to an unsettling silence. The usual morning sounds of a 5-year-old stirring, the small footsteps on the floor, were absent. A prickle of unease cut through the early morning calm. He got out of bed and went to check on Elena. He pushed open the door to her room, and his heart stopped. Her bed was empty. The blankets were disturbed, but she wasn't there. A wave of confusion washed over him. Perhaps she had gotten up early and gone downstairs to watch cartoons. He moved through the quiet house, calling her name. Elena? The silence that answered him was heavy and wrong. He walked into the living room, expecting to see her curled up on the couch, maybe near where their guest had been sleeping. But the couch was also empty. Zachary Anderson was gone. The blanket and pillow they had given him were still there, but the man himself had vanished. Now, a sharp, cold dread began to take hold. Matt's mind raced, trying to piece together a scenario that made sense. Had Anderson woken up early and taken Elena to the park? Had they gone for a drive? But the illogic of it was suffocating. Nothing explained why they would leave without a word, so early in the morning. His search became more frantic. As he went from room to room, his calls for his daughter growing more desperate. He glanced out the window, looking for Anderson's vehicle, and the dread solidified into sheer terror. Anderson hadn't driven his own car there, but Matt's white Chevy Silverado pickup truck, which had been parked right outside, was gone. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. Anderson hadn't just left. He had taken Matt's truck. In a final, sickening realization, Matt looked for his cell phone, which he had left in the living room the night before. It was also missing. The pieces clicked into place, forming a horrifying picture. His daughter was gone, his friend was gone, and his truck and phone had been stolen. The benign hospitality of the previous night had curdled into a parent's worst nightmare. Overcome with a panic he had never known, Matt grabbed another phone and dialed 911, his voice trembling as he reported that his 5-year-old daughter had been taken. The 911 call from the Ertl home shattered the morning quiet at the Meeker County Sheriff's Office. A report of a missing 5-year-old, potentially taken by an adult in a stolen vehicle, is one of the highest priority calls a department can receive. Instantly, the case became an all-hands-on-deck emergency. Deputies were dispatched to the residence in Watkins, where they were met by a distraught Matt and Kayla Ertl. The officers worked to calm the terrified parents while systematically gathering the critical details. They confirmed the sequence of events. A trusted friend had stayed the night, and now both he and their daughter were gone, along with the family truck. The facts were stark and terrifying. Sheriff Brian Cruz and his investigators knew they were in a race against time. Every minute that passed decreased the chances of finding Elena unharmed. The information provided by the Ertls was clear and actionable: a specific child, a named suspect, and a detailed description of the stolen vehicle. The case met the stringent criteria for the most powerful tool in a child abduction investigation. The decision was made swiftly. They would issue an Amber Alert. At 11:15 a.m., the alert blasted across Minnesota. Cell phones buzzed with an urgent notification. Electronic highway signs lit up with the grim message. News channels interrupted their programming. Suddenly, the search was no longer confined to Meeker County. It was a statewide manhunt.
Littlefield Liz Collin is off tonight. We are following a developing story at 5. The BCA has issued an Amber Alert for a 5-year-old girl from Watkins. This is Elena Ertl, and she was last seen at her house at 2 in the morning. According to investigators, families say they noticed her missing about 8 this morning. Who was staying overnight was also missing. This is 23 Anderson. They believe he works with the girl's father. According to police, Anderson has no sex offender history, and they aren't sure of a motive. Family says Anderson took their truck, which had a cell phone. The phone last pinged in Todd County around 9 this morning, and it has since been shut off. The BCA says that Anderson now has a shaggy short beard and may be wearing a black t-shirt like this that says Riverside, Minnesota Softball. Maybe a white 2002 GMC Sierra, number 107. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Elena Anderson, you are asked to call 911 immediately and do not confront the suspect.
The public was now an army of lookouts, tasked with finding a white 2002 Chevy Silverado pickup truck with Minnesota license plate 107 KMT. The alert painted a clear picture for the public. They were looking for Elena Ertl, a small 5-year-old girl with sandy brown hair. The suspect was Zachary Todd Anderson, a 26-year-old man. His photo, alongside Elena's, was broadcast across the state. With the activation of the Amber Alert, the quiet, personal tragedy of the Ertl family had become a public crisis. The clock was ticking, and every law enforcement officer and citizen in Minnesota now knew that a little girl's life hung in the balance. While the Amber Alert mobilized the eyes and ears of the public, a specialized team of investigators focused on a different kind of trail, a digital one. In the modern age of law enforcement, a suspect on the run almost always leaves an electronic footprint. In this case, Zachary Anderson had inadvertently provided investigators with 2. He had taken Matt Ertl's cell phone, and he was carrying his own. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA, was brought in to assist local authorities, lending their expertise in technical surveillance. Their first priority was to ping both devices, a process that uses cellular network data to approximate a phone's location by triangulating its signal between cell towers. The first phone to yield a clue was the one belonging to Elena's father. The pings from Matt Ertl's phone led investigators to a specific area near a cell tower just a few miles from the Ertl home. It was a clear sign that Anderson had likely discarded the device shortly after leaving the house, a crude attempt to cover his tracks and prevent being followed. A search team was dispatched to the location, and soon enough, they found the stolen phone abandoned by the roadside. The discovery confirmed Anderson's direction of travel, but also signaled that he was aware he could be tracked, making the search more challenging. With the first phone recovered, the entire focus shifted to Anderson's personal device. The BCA continued to ping his phone, and the data began to paint a disturbing picture. The signal wasn't heading toward a major city or a populated area. Instead, it was moving steadily northward, deep into the rural, wooded expanses of central Minnesota. Each new ping showed him moving further away from Watkins, further into remote territory. The digital trail led them specifically toward Cass County, an area known for its lakes, forests, and sparse population. It was the kind of place where someone could easily disappear. The electronic breadcrumbs were leading law enforcement directly to Anderson, narrowing the massive statewide search to a specific, isolated corner of Minnesota. The manhunt was no longer a blind search. It had a destination. The digital breadcrumbs from Zachary Anderson's cell phone did not lead to a random point on a map. They led investigators to a very specific and familiar location, a secluded property near the small town of Leader in Cass County. It was a rustic family cabin, nestled deep in the woods and owned by Anderson's parents. It was a place he knew intimately, a perfect hideout far from the immediate search zone. By mid-afternoon, a formidable force of law enforcement officers from the Cass County Sheriff's Office, the Meeker County Sheriff's Office, and the BCA converged on the area. They approached the property with tactical precision, their vehicles moving silently down the remote dirt roads. As they neared the cabin, they saw it. Parked partially hidden amongst the trees was the stolen white Chevy Silverado pickup truck. They had found the truck from the Amber Alert. Anderson had to be close. Officers established a secure perimeter around the cabin and the surrounding wooded property. They began a methodical sweep, checking the outbuildings first, their senses on high alert. The main cabin was locked. With caution, they breached the door and began to clear the small structure room by room. At first, it appeared to be empty. The downstairs was clear, the kitchen and living area showing no signs of recent activity. The search moved to the upper level, a small loft area often used for sleeping or storage. As officers ascended the ladder, they found him. Huddled in the dim light of the loft, disheveled and surrounded by the clutter, was Zachary Anderson. He offered no resistance. His desperate flight was over, his chosen sanctuary now, the scene of his capture. He was taken into custody quietly, his demeanor described by officers as subdued and detached. But as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the most urgent question remained unanswered. He was here, alone. Where was Elena? With Zachary Anderson in custody, the atmosphere among the officers was a tense mix of relief and profound anxiety. They had their suspect, but the little girl was still missing. They immediately transported Anderson to the Cass County Sheriff's Office for interrogation, a process that began around 4:30 p.m. The entire focus of the investigation now rested on getting one piece of information from him: Elena's location. Initially, Anderson was evasive and uncooperative. He deflected questions and denied knowing where Elena was, attempting to feign ignorance. Investigators pressed him, knowing that every second that passed was critical. They confronted him with the evidence: the stolen truck, his flight to the cabin, the digital trail that led them directly to him. His weak denials began to crumble under the weight of the undeniable facts. Finally, facing the relentless pressure of the interrogation, Anderson's wall of denial broke. His story shifted. He admitted that Elena was no longer alive. The confession hung in the air, a devastating confirmation of everyone's worst fears. He then provided investigators with a vague description of the location where she could be found. He directed them to a location not far from the cabin, a remote, swampy area, thick with trees and undergrowth. Armed with this horrifying information, a search party was immediately organized. Led by Anderson's grim directions, officers fanned out into the dense woods of Moran Township, a landscape of tangled brush and wetlands. They combed the area, their hope replaced with a somber determination. The search didn't last long.
We have an update now to the Amber Alert we told you about at the top of our newscast, not to give you. The Meeker County Sheriff's Office says that the body of 5-year-old Elena Anderson has been arrested. The little girl's family said that Anderson was staying with them last night at their home in Watkins, Minnesota. We're missing this morning. We do have a reporter in Meeker County right now. We're continuing to get new information about this investigation.
Following his grim directions, they searched a swampy section of the woods, tucked away from any trail or path. There, they found her. A crude attempt had been made to conceal her location with fallen branches and brush. It was a scene of profound tragedy, the final, heartbreaking destination of a search that had captivated and horrified an entire state. It was a scene of profound tragedy, the final, heartbreaking destination of a search that had captivated and horrified an entire state. The race against time was over, and it had ended in the most devastating way imaginable. The discovery of Elena marked the tragic end of the search, but it was the beginning of the next critical phase, determining the circumstances of her death. She was carefully recovered from the remote wooded area and transported for forensic examination. This examination would provide the irrefutable evidence needed to understand what had happened in her final hours. The results of the medical examination were heartbreaking. The examiner determined that Elena's death was the result of a deliberate and brutal act, confirming the tragic nature of the crime. The findings indicated a clear intent to cause harm, revealing the severity of the encounter. Furthermore, the examination revealed she had sustained other serious injuries, which pointed to a physical struggle that a child could not have withstood. But the examination revealed additional, crucial details. The medical examiner found unequivocal physical evidence that established the motive for the crime. This discovery answered the main question investigators had been asking. It became clear that the abduction was committed in the course of another very serious felony. Armed with this definitive evidence, prosecutors now had a complete picture of his actions and could pursue the most severe charges possible under the law. With the irrefutable evidence from the autopsy and his own confession, the legal path for Zachary Anderson was short and absolute. He was charged with first-degree murder in connection with other serious felonies, one of the most severe offenses under Minnesota law. The premeditated and brutal nature of his crimes left little room for legal maneuvering. The entire state, which had collectively held its breath during the Amber Alert, now waited for justice. Facing an overwhelming case built by investigators and the undeniable forensic evidence, Anderson and his legal counsel made a pivotal decision. Rather than proceeding to a jury trial, a process that would have forced the Ertl family to relive every horrific detail of Elena's final days in a public courtroom, Anderson chose to plead guilty. On July 17, 2017, nearly a year after the crime, he stood before a judge in Meeker County District Court and formally admitted his guilt. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, sparing the family the agony of a trial. The sentencing hearing was held shortly thereafter. It was a somber and emotionally charged proceeding. The courtroom was a space for the Ertl family to finally confront the man who had shattered their world. Elena's parents, Matt and Kayla, delivered powerful and heartbreaking victim impact statements. They spoke of a vibrant, happy little girl who loved to laugh and whose future was stolen by a man they had welcomed into their home as a friend. They described the unending pain and the gaping hole left in their lives, a void that could never be filled. Their words painted a vivid portrait, not of a victim, but of the bright light that had been extinguished. After hearing their statements, the judge delivered the sentence. There was no leniency, no possibility of a future outside of prison walls for Zachary Anderson. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was the maximum sentence allowed, a declaration that his actions were so heinous he had forfeited his right to ever walk free again. For his crimes against Elena Ertl, a life sentence meant just that, a life for a life, ensuring the man who stole a little girl's future would spend the rest of his own days behind bars.
Nearly 2 months later, a memorial continues to grow outside their Watkins home. The home to a family sorely missing its youngest member.
She was very loving.
Elena was known for her friendliness and versatile personality, from her love of My Little Ponies to the time she spent hunting with her dad.
She'd come in our room every morning and give us a kiss good morning and, made sure everybody else was okay.
Kayla and Matt Ertl hold memories and many tokens close as they try not to concentrate on the evil that took Elena away.
She's an innocent little girl that did nothing wrong.
Matt had worked with Zach Anderson at a utility line company for 4 years. Anderson lived in Coon Rapids, so when they'd play softball in the summer, he'd sleep over. On that Saturday morning in August, the family woke up to find Anderson and Elena missing, along with Matt's pickup. 3 hours after an Amber Alert was issued, canine officers found Anderson near his family's cabin by Motley. Elena's body was found nearby. Investigators say she'd been before Anderson killed her.
People that you think that you know, and that you trust, and become your friend, and you have in your home, and turn your back on you, and you don't understand it.
The Ertles admit they will struggle trusting new friends moving forward. Still, they are continuously reminded of the good that remains.
The support has been overwhelming.
Yeah.
Gifts and cards from so many touched by Elena's life.
This one too was a journal or a day by day.
Even strangers from states away pledging to be more patient parents and not taking the time they have with their own kids for granted.
He'll make comments of certain shows or different things he did that made her laugh.
The Ertles are pushing on for their son, Carter, and for their small community that created a public space to heal.
Look outside and there'd be 4 or 5 kids just sitting there reading books, and it's cool to see.
It's where they find comfort in the words they are certain Elena would want them to hear. When it rains, watch for rainbows. When it's dark, watch for stars. Liz Collin, WCCO 4 News.
Long after the courtroom fell silent and the legal chapters closed, the true story of Elena Ertl continues. It is a story not found in case files or headlines, but in the quiet, loving memory of a little girl whose light was unforgettable. Elena was a whirlwind of joy. Those who loved her speak not of a victim, but of a 5-year-old spitfire with an infectious laugh and sandy hair that was always a little messy from playing. She was the boundless energy of a happy childhood, a little girl with a big, bright personality who was just beginning to explore the wonders of the world. She was a cherished daughter and a beloved friend, a small person who left an immeasurably large space in the hearts of those she touched. While a deep shadow was cast on a summer day in 2016, that darkness cannot extinguish the memory of her spirit. To focus on the end is to miss the beauty of the life she lived. Her legacy is not the sorrow of her absence, but the love she inspired. It lives on in her family's hearts, in the shared stories of her funny antics, and in the quiet strength of a community that came together in her name. She is the song that ended too soon, but whose melody lingers for all who were lucky enough to hear it. Elena Ertl is remembered not for how she was lost, but for how she lived, with laughter, with spirit, and with a light that continues to shine in the memories of all who loved her.
No, I did not kill Alexis Murphy or hurt Alexis Murphy.
Do you know where she is?
No, sir, I do not.
And do you know what happened to her?
No, sir, I do not.
It's like my heart just been ripped out. My heart been ripped out.
It's been 6 days since Alexis Murphy disappeared from a gas station near Charlottesville.
The 17-year-old's car has since been found, but no sign of Alexis. Now, time is of the essence, and the FBI is hoping surveillance pictures will help speed up the search.
The summer of 2013 was a time of bright promise for Alexis Tiara Murphy. At 17 years old, she was on the verge of her senior year at Nelson County High School in Livingston, Virginia, a small rural community where families were deeply rooted and knew their neighbors. Alexis was a vibrant and familiar face in that community. She was known for her infectious laugh, her keen sense of fashion, and her meticulous attention to her hair. Her social media was a reflection of her personality, full of selfies, updates about her day, and interactions with a wide circle of friends. She was deeply embedded in the digital world of a modern teenager, constantly connected through texts and tweets. Beyond her social life, Alexis was a beloved daughter, granddaughter, and sister. Her family, particularly her mother Laura Murphy and her grandfather, described a close-knit and loving home life. She was ambitious, with plans to attend college after graduation, and dreams of a career that would allow her to express her creativity. The future seemed clear, an open road leading to new experiences and the adventures of young adulthood. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? What city are you in? And what's the time and weather like where you are right now? It's always interesting to hear how this story reaches people all over the world. I'm really happy you're here with me. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new stories. August 3, 2013, began as a perfectly ordinary Saturday. The air was thick with the late summer heat of Central Virginia. Inside the Murphy home, the focus was on the upcoming school year. Alexis had a specific plan for the day. First, she was heading to a salon in nearby Lynchburg to get her hair done, a final touch before her senior portraits. After that, she intended to drive to Charlottesville, about an hour away, to do some back-to-school shopping and find a new dress for a night out with friends. That morning, she followed the familiar family routine. She exchanged "I love yous" with her mother and grandmother before walking out the door.
My jacket never wants to go right. Still ain't right.
Saturday, August 3rd, 2013. Alexis Murphy tweeted Bergbound. 17-year-old had plans to shop in Lynchburg. Alexis never returned home. On Sunday, August 4th, her family alerted the Nelson County Sheriff's Office.
Completely out of character for her. If she was going to miss her curfew or be late for her curfew, she would have called and said, I'm going to be late.
Law enforcement started searching by land and air.
Usually when a teenager is called in missing.
Just before 7:00 p.m., she posted on Twitter, mentioning her hair plans and her trip to Charlottesville. It was a simple, public declaration of a teenager's weekend plans, broadcast to her friends and followers without a second thought. She climbed into her white 2003 Nissan Maxima, a car that was her symbol of freedom and a common sight on the roads around Nelson County. For her family, it was just another Saturday. Alexis was responsible and always checked in. They had no reason to believe this day would be any different from the countless others before it. The simple errand, a rite of passage for a teenager preparing for a new school year, was an event defined by its absolute normalcy. But how could a day that started with such familiar, happy routines end in a silence that would soon consume an entire community? The evening of Saturday, August 3rd, began to bleed into the night, and a sense of unease settled over the Murphy household. Alexis was a conscientious teenager who understood her family's rules. She was expected to be home by her 11:00 p.m. curfew, and if her plans changed, she always called. As the clock ticked past that deadline with no word, initial parental annoyance began to curdle into genuine concern. Laura Murphy started the routine every parent in her situation does. She called Alexis's cell phone. The calls went straight to voicemail, each unanswered ring amplifying the growing anxiety. Laura then began calling Alexis's friends, her voice growing tighter with each conversation. The responses were all the same. No one had seen her since that afternoon. No one knew where she was. The planned night out for which she was supposedly buying a dress had never materialized. The digital connection that was so central to Alexis's life had gone dark. Her active Twitter feed was static. Her phone, an extension of her own hand, was silent. For a teenager so constantly online, this digital void was a significant deviation from her established patterns of behavior. By 11:30 p.m., the concern had escalated into outright panic. This was more than just a teenager missing a curfew. This was completely out of character. The family made the decision that no parent wants to make. They called the Nelson County Sheriff's Office to report Alexis Tiara Murphy as a missing person. The initial response from law enforcement was guided by standard procedure. Runaway cases are common, and officers are trained to consider this possibility first. However, the Murphy family was adamant. Alexis was not a runaway. She had her hair appointment money, deep family ties, and was excited about her senior year. There was no conflict at home, no reason for her to leave. Their insistence, and the unusual circumstances, the complete lack of communication, persuaded deputies to take the report with heightened seriousness. An alert was issued. Her name, description, and the details of her white Nissan Maxima were entered into law enforcement databases. The official search began in the pre-dawn hours of Sunday, August 4th. The family's frantic private search transformed into an official investigation. As word spread through Livingston and the surrounding counties, a wave of fear rippled through the community. A local girl, one of their own, had vanished. The question on everyone's mind was simple and terrifying. Where was Alexis? With the dawn of Sunday, August 4th, the search for Alexis Murphy escalated into a full-scale, multi-agency operation. The Nelson County Sheriff's Office, recognizing the potential gravity of the situation, quickly requested assistance. The Virginia State Police brought in advanced investigative resources, and soon, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the effort, contributing manpower and technical expertise. A unified command post was established as the case was designated high priority. The initial phase of the investigation focused on the only solid information they had: Alexis's own digital footprint. Investigators immediately pulled her social media records. Her final tweet, sent at 7:09 p.m. on Saturday, became a critical piece of the timeline. It read, "Chillin' in my car, in Lynchburg. Going to da hair salon, then to Seville. I'm so bored. This post confirmed her intended itinerary. Yet, as detectives began analyzing her cell phone data, a troubling contradiction emerged. After obtaining an emergency warrant, they learned from her service provider that the last signal from Alexis's iPhone had registered with a cell tower in Lovingston, her hometown, not Lynchburg or Charlottesville. This crucial piece of data suggested that after her tweet, her phone had traveled back toward her home, a significant deviation from her stated plans. While the technical teams analyzed the phone records, a massive ground search was underway. Law enforcement and a growing army of civilian volunteers scoured the back roads and wooded areas of Nelson County. Flyers bearing Alexis's smiling face became a ubiquitous sight in storefront windows and on community bulletin boards. The search for her white Nissan Maxima was a top priority. A "Be on the lookout" or BOLO alert was broadcast to law enforcement agencies across Virginia and neighboring states. On Tuesday, August 6th, the alert yielded a result. A patrol officer located the Nissan Maxima, not in Lovingston, but exactly where Alexis had said she was going, Charlottesville. It was parked in the sprawling lot of the Carmike 6 movie theater at the Seminole Square Shopping Center. The discovery of the car was a double-edged sword for investigators. It confirmed part of her plan was executed, but it deepened the mystery surrounding the phone ping. The vehicle was unlocked, and an initial inspection revealed no obvious signs of foul play or a struggle inside. Her phone and purse were missing. The car being there while her phone's last signal was miles away in Lovingston created a perplexing geographical puzzle. The journey was fractured. Alexis had started her day, tweeted her plans, but somewhere between that message and her car being abandoned in Charlottesville, something had gone terribly wrong. Investigators now had a critical timeline gap, and the key to solving her disappearance, they suspected, was located in that contradictory signal from Lovingston. The discovery of Alexis Murphy's Nissan Maxima in Charlottesville created a jarring geographical contradiction for investigators. Her car was in one city, yet her phone's last signal was registered miles away in her hometown of Lovingston. To solve the puzzle of her disappearance, detectives had to reconstruct her movements and bridge that gap. Their strategy was methodical. They would retrace the path along Route 29, the main artery connecting the two locations, and scrutinize every possible point of contact. This meant painstakingly collecting and reviewing surveillance footage from businesses along the highway. Their attention quickly focused on the Liberty gas station in Lovingston. It was a well-trafficked location, situated directly on Route 29, and critically, it was in the immediate vicinity of where Alexis's cell phone had last pinged the local tower. On August 7th, investigators secured the station's surveillance recordings from the evening of August 3rd. As they methodically scanned through the hours of grainy, time-stamped video, their painstaking work paid off. There, pulling up to the entrance, was Alexis's white Nissan Maxima. The footage provided a chilling, silent narrative of what might have been her final public moments. At approximately 7:15 p.m., Alexis is seen entering the gas station's convenience store. A few moments later, a man with a distinct beard and wearing a camouflage shirt is seen holding the door open for her as she exits. They appear to engage in a brief conversation. There are no visible signs of distress or coercion in the footage. The interaction, to an outside observer, appears casual. Alexis then gets back into her car. The man is seen gesturing toward her vehicle, and after a moment, she drives out of the camera's view. Investigators now had a face, a crucial person of interest, who was undeniably one of the last people to interact with Alexis. But who was he? They showed the images to the store clerks, one of whom recognized the man as a regular customer. They knew his name, Randy Allen Taylor. A quick check of law enforcement records provided an address. Taylor, 48 years old, lived in a camper trailer on a plot of land off US 29, not far from the gas station itself. With this identification, the entire focus of the investigation shifted. They were no longer just searching for a missing girl, they were pursuing a tangible lead. The timeline now had a new critical data point, and the investigation had a name. The next logical step was to pay a visit to Randy Taylor and find out what he knew about his brief encounter with Alexis Murphy. Armed with the surveillance footage and the name Randy Allen Taylor, investigators made their way to his known address on August 8th. The property was located just off Route 29, a short distance from the Liberty gas station. Taylor lived in a weathered camper trailer, a small, isolated dwelling that stood in stark contrast to the surrounding Virginia countryside. When detectives approached him, Taylor was cooperative, readily admitting that he had seen Alexis Murphy at the gas station. He began to weave a detailed story, an account that would become the foundation of his defense and, ultimately, his undoing. Taylor claimed that the encounter was innocent. He alleged that Alexis had approached him to ask about his customized vehicle and that he had mentioned a mutual acquaintance who dealt marijuana. According to his initial statement, they went back to his trailer, smoked marijuana together, and that she was unharmed when she left. He claimed she departed with another man, a black male in his early 20s, whom he knew only as Drew or Dre, who was supposedly driving a dark-colored Chevy. He provided a phone number for this individual. However, when investigators checked the number, it was registered to a man in another state who had no connection to the case. Taylor's story, while providing an explanation for his presence, contained inconsistencies that raised immediate suspicion. His shifting details and the dead-end phone number provided investigators with enough probable cause to secure a search warrant for his camper and property. They now faced a critical question. Would a search of his property confirm his seemingly helpful account, or would it expose a lie? A specialized forensic team was dispatched to execute the warrant. They began a meticulous, inch-by-inch search of the small, cluttered living space inside the camper. It was here that the investigation pivoted from a missing person case to a homicide investigation. Inside, they found several small but damning pieces of physical evidence. A search of the bedroom area revealed a torn, bloody t-shirt. On a piece of carpet, they discovered a single, broken artificial fingernail. Its design later matched to the ones Alexis was known to wear. They also located a human hair, caught on a blue plaid shirt. The most significant discovery, however, was a tiny diamond stud, pried loose from its setting. Alexis Murphy's family confirmed she had a similar diamond stud on her cell phone case, which was still missing. These items were carefully bagged, tagged, and rushed to the state forensic lab for analysis. The results were definitive and irrefutable. DNA extracted from the human hair was a positive match to Alexis Murphy. The DNA found on the broken fingernail also belonged to her. The circumstantial evidence was now backed by forensic certainty. Pieces of Alexis herself had been found inside Randy Taylor's home. Confronted with this physical evidence, Taylor's story began to crumble under questioning. His account of the evening's events shifted, and his credibility evaporated. On August 11, 2013, just 8 days after Alexis vanished, Randy Allen Taylor was arrested and charged with her abduction. The camper had given up its secrets, providing the physical proof that linked him directly to her disappearance. In May 2014, 9 months after Alexis Murphy vanished, Randy Allen Taylor was brought before a Nelson County court to stand trial. The legal challenge facing the prosecution, led by Commonwealth's attorney Anthony Martin, was immense. They were tasked with proving not only that Taylor had abducted Alexis, but that he had murdered her, all without the most fundamental piece of evidence in a homicide case, the victim's body. The entire case rested on a meticulously constructed pyramid of circumstantial and forensic evidence, and the prosecution had to ensure it was strong enough to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. The trial began, with the prosecution laying out its timeline of events. The jury was shown the now infamous surveillance footage from the Liberty gas station, the last time Alexis was verifiably seen alive, in the company of the accused. The prosecution then methodically introduced the evidence recovered from Taylor's trailer. Forensic experts testified about the DNA analysis, explaining that the hair found on a shirt and the genetic material from the torn fingernail were a conclusive match to Alexis Murphy. Family members took the stand, providing emotional but crucial testimony, identifying the unique design of the broken nail as identical to those Alexis wore. They also confirmed that her cell phone, which was never recovered, had been decorated with a distinctive diamond stud, just like the one found on Taylor's carpet. A central pillar of the prosecution's case was Taylor's own words. Investigators detailed his evolving and contradictory statements. They presented his initial, fabricated story about the man named Dree, or Drew, and showed the jury how the phone number he provided was a dead end, a clear attempt to mislead the investigation. The prosecution argued that these lies were not the actions of an innocent witness, but rather demonstrated a clear consciousness of guilt. Why invent a person, they asked. unless you were trying to conceal the truth of what really happened in that trailer. The defense, in turn, argued that the prosecution's case was built on assumption. They conceded that Alexis had been in Taylor's camper, but insisted there was no definitive proof that she had been harmed there, let alone killed. They clung to Taylor's story, portraying him as a misguided man who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when Randy Taylor chose to testify in his own defense. On the stand, he repeated his claim that he and Alexis had smoked marijuana, and that she had left his trailer unharmed with the mysterious Dre. Under a grueling cross-examination by Anthony Martin, Taylor's story began to fray. He was unable to provide any verifiable details about this other man. He could not explain how Alexis's DNA-laden fingernail was torn off inside his trailer, nor could he offer a plausible reason for the presence of her hair and the diamond from her phone. His demeanor was reportedly inconsistent, and his account failed to withstand the logical scrutiny of the prosecution. After a week of testimony, the case went to the jury. The question was clear. Did the sum of the evidence, the video, the lies, the hair, the nail, the diamond equal murder? The deliberation was remarkably swift. After less than 2 hours, the jury returned. They found Randy Allen Taylor guilty on all counts: first-degree murder committed during the act of an abduction, abduction with intent to defile, and 2 alternative counts of second-degree murder. The verdict was a landmark legal victory, proving that justice could be secured even in the devastating absence of a body. On July 23, 2014, 2 months after the jury delivered its guilty verdict, Randy Allen Taylor returned to the Nelson County courtroom for sentencing. The atmosphere was heavy, with the weight of a legal conclusion that offered no emotional closure. For the Murphy family, this day was not about vengeance, but about accountability for the man who had irrevocably fractured their lives, yet refused to give them the one thing they desperately needed: the location of Alexis's body. Taylor remained silent, offering no statement and showing no remorse. It was left to the judge to speak to the gravity of his crimes. The judge handed down the maximum possible punishment: 2 consecutive life sentences, ensuring that Randy Taylor would spend the remainder of his natural life in prison. In his pronouncement, the judge condemned Taylor's calculated actions and his profound lack of compassion, not only for the crime itself, but for his continued refusal to ease the family's suffering. The legal battle was over, but for the Murphy family, the most agonizing chapter was just beginning: the wait. What does a family do when they have a conviction but no closure? For Laura Murphy and her family, the years that followed the trial were a unique form of torment. They lived in a state of suspended grief. They had a conviction, a legal declaration of what had happened, but they did not have Alexis. They could not lay her to rest, could not visit a grave, could not have a final memorial. Every day was a reminder of her absence, an open wound that could not begin to heal. Refusing to let their daughter become a forgotten statistic, the Murphy family channeled their pain into action. They became tireless advocates, determined to keep Alexis's name and story in the public consciousness. They gave interviews, participated in documentaries, and maintained a social media presence dedicated to her memory and the ongoing search. They worked closely with law enforcement, regularly checking in for any updates or new leads. Their persistence was a testament to their love for Alexis, a promise that they would never, ever stop looking for her. While Randy Taylor sat in prison, maintaining his innocence and offering no information, the Murphys organized and participated in community searches, following up on any credible tip, no matter how remote. The community of Nelson County, and indeed a wider network of supporters, rallied around them. Anniversaries of her disappearance were marked with vigils and remembrances. The case became a symbol of a community's shared loss and resilience. The legal system had provided what justice it could, but only Randy Taylor held the key to true resolution, and he remained silent. Years passed. 2015, 2016, 2017. With each passing year, the hope of finding Alexis waned for many, but never for her family. They lived with the dual reality of knowing who was responsible while being haunted by the great unknown of where she was. The verdict was a fact. The sentences were being served, but the search for Alexis Murphy was far from over. For more than 7 years, Randy Taylor's silence held the Murphy family hostage. While the legal system had provided a conviction, the emotional resolution remained locked away with him in prison. Then, in late 2020, something shifted. investigators received new, credible information regarding the possible location of Alexis's remains. While the specific source of this intelligence has not been publicly disclosed by authorities, it was specific enough to justify a renewed and highly targeted search effort, focusing on a piece of private property just off Route 29 in Livingston. After 7 years of silence, a critical question remained. Would this finally be the lead that brought Alexis home? On December 3, 2020, investigators descended on the property. The search was slow and methodical. Finally, after hours of painstaking work, they made a discovery. Human remains were unearthed. The area was immediately secured as a crime scene, and a state forensic anthropology team was called in to carefully excavate and recover the evidence. For the Murphy family, this news initiated another torturous wait as the remains were sent to the chief medical examiner's office in Richmond for formal identification. 2 months later, on February 5, 2021, the confirmation came. Through dental records and DNA analysis, the remains were positively identified as those of Alexis Tiara Murphy. The official announcement, made on February 17th, brought an end to the 7.5-year search. The family's reaction was a complex mixture of profound grief and overwhelming relief. The devastating finality of her death was now a concrete reality, yet with it came the end of a torturous uncertainty. They could finally bring their daughter home. In a statement, they expressed their gratitude to law enforcement and their supporters, saying, "Our family is grieving, and we ask for prayers and privacy at this very difficult time." The discovery of Alexis cemented her lasting legacy, which extends far beyond the memory of the bright girl from Nelson County. Her case directly prompted legislative change in Virginia. In 2014, the Alexis Murphy Law was enacted. Recognizing that the criteria for an Amber Alert did not apply to many endangered missing persons over the age of 17, this law established a new system. It allows for the immediate public dissemination of information, similar to an Amber Alert, for any abducted individual, regardless of age, for whom law enforcement believes their life is in danger. Furthermore, her trial remains a landmark case for the Virginia judiciary, a powerful example of how a no-body murder prosecution can succeed through the meticulous presentation of digital and forensic evidence. It set a precedent that has been studied by prosecutors across the state. After a private funeral service, Alexis Murphy was finally laid to rest, bringing a somber closure to a story that began with a simple trip for school supplies. Her family's unwavering perseverance ensured that she was never just a case file, and their fight for answers ultimately brought her on the long road home.
A sparky girl who was full of life, but you took that life from her. All that lay ahead of her, a career, loves, and family of her own, will now never be.
So what can you tell me about the murder of Tia Sharp, Stuart?
And that was it, and then the door closed and she walks out. I don't take precise times and things like that, but when she walked out that door, I know damn well it was 12:10. I called into my clock, because as I was hoovering up the dog's mess by my kitchen, I look up and I've got a great big clock in front of me on the cooker, which says 12:10.
For the residents of New Addington, a sprawling housing estate in the southern reaches of London, the summer of 2012 had been unremarkable. It was a place of close-knit streets and familiar faces, where the lives of families were deeply intertwined. For 12-year-old Tia Sharp, it was simply home to the person she adored most, her grandmother, Christine Bicknell. Tia was a frequent and welcome visitor at 20 The Lindens, the modest terraced house Christine shared with her partner, Stuart Hazel. These visits were a cherished routine, a constant in Tia's young life. Tia was on the cusp of adolescence, a girl described by all who knew her as bubbly, bright, and full of life. She loved her phone, her friends, and the familiar comfort of her family. Her bond with Christine was particularly strong. Tia looked up to her grandmother, and the time they spent together was precious. So, when Tia prepared to stay over on Thursday, August 20, there was no sense of foreboding, no hint of the darkness that was about to descend. It was just another sleepover at Nan's house. Her mother, Natalie Sharp, had dropped her off. The plan was simple and familiar. a night at Christine's, perhaps a trip out the next day. The house on the Lindens was a typical family home, filled with the everyday clutter of life. Christine had gone out for the evening to work a night shift, leaving Tia in the care of Hazel, a man who had been part of the family for years. To Tia, he was just her Nan's boyfriend, a familiar figure in the household. That night, according to Hazel's later account, was entirely ordinary. He claimed they stayed up late, playing video games and watching television, before Tia eventually went to sleep in her usual spot, the spare bedroom. As the sun rose on Friday, August 3rd, the house was quiet. Christine had not yet returned from her shift. The day stretched ahead, full of the promise of a typical summer Friday. According to the only story the world would hear for a week, Tia woke up, got dressed, and by midday was ready to head out. She had plans, Hazel would say, to meet friends and travel to the Whitgift shopping center in nearby Croydon to buy new flip-flops. He would claim he gave her £10 for her bus fare and watched her walk out the door, a slight figure in her yellow top, disappearing down the path of the Lindens, ready for a day of teenage freedom. It was the last time, he insisted, anyone would ever see her alive. The first hint that something was wrong came not as a sudden shock, but as a slow, creeping dread. Hours after Tia had supposedly left for the shopping center, calls to her mobile phone went straight to voicemail. This was unusual. Tia, like most girls her age, was rarely separated from her phone. As the afternoon wore on and the sun began to dip lower, a knot of anxiety tightened in her mother Natalie's stomach. Tia was meant to be home by 6 p.m. When that time came and went with no word, worry turned to outright panic. Frantic calls were made between family members. No one had seen her. No one had heard from her. By 9 p.m., the family could wait no longer. They reported Tia missing to the police. The official version of events, the one that would shape the first critical days of the search, came from Stuart Hazel. He calmly told Natalie, and later the police, a simple and plausible story. Tia had left the house at around noon, he said. She was heading to Croydon to buy shoes. He claimed to have walked her to the end of the road, giving her bus money and watching as she headed towards the tram stop. He even mentioned her last words to him, a casual goodbye. It was a neat, tidy narrative that left no immediate room for suspicion. She was just a 12-year-old girl who had missed her curfew. But for Natalie Sharp, the story felt wrong. Her daughter was sensible and responsible. She would have called. The police, however, initially treated it as a standard missing teenager case. They took Hazel's statement at face value. Why wouldn't they? He was her grandmother's long-term partner, a man who was, for all intents and purposes, family. The initial investigation focused on the outside world on the route to the tram stop, the shopping center, and the friends Tia might have met. The family, however, refused to be calm. Driven by a primal fear, they launched their own search. Natalie, her face etched with a desperate terror that would soon become familiar to the entire nation, began pacing the streets of New Addington, calling her daughter's name into the darkness. She and her partner, David Niles, printed homemade missing posters with Tia's smiling face and plastered them on every lamppost, shop window, and bus stop they could find. The local community, seeing the family's raw anguish, began to stir. Friends and neighbors joined the search, their flashlights cutting through the late-night gloom. But as the hours bled into the next day, every street checked and every call unanswered only deepened the mystery. Tia Sharp had, it seemed, simply vanished into thin air. In the glare of the media lights that descended on New Addington, Stuart Hazel stepped into the role of the concerned family member with unnerving ease. While Tia's mother Natalie was visibly distraught, often unable to speak through her tears, Hazel became the family's unlikely spokesperson.
Tell me a little bit about Tia's life. I mean, is she a happy girl? Is she jolly? Has she got any problems?
No, she's got no problems at all. She's a happy-go-lucky golden angel. You know what I mean? She's perfect. There's no arguments, nothing we can think of, absolutely nothing.
So Tia stays here Thursday night, just with you. Christine's working. Talk me through Friday up until the last time you see her. Tell me exactly what you did.
Tia's come down the stairs around about 10:30, 11, something like that maybe. Because I know she was on about going up to Croydon for about, she wanted to get up early. She picked up your mum's DS up, played the DS for a little while. I said, well, we're going to have some breakfast. So I made her some toast, and she had the toast, and then she wanted a sausage roll, because she's always eating sausage rolls. Basically, then she was sitting there. She doesn't take her washing up out, so I took her washing up out. Just started doing a little bit of washing up in the kitchen. She was in there. She was telling me what she was doing, but I weren't really logging it into my head. I didn't. Do you know what I mean? Remember, like the kids, they talk to you. It goes in one ear, stays there for a second, it goes out. You know what I mean? As I was hoovering, then she walked out. She walked past me from the front room to go out, and she walked out the front door. That is all I know. And she left her phone on charge, because I told her to sit there and leave her phone on charge. I didn't mean leave it on charge, because what Tia doing, she plays on the BB thing, but then she uses it as it's charging, so there's no charge going through to it. So when I said to her, just leave your phone on charge, it means leave her phone on charge, not use it, let it charge up a bit, then you can actually take it with you or whatever, because she's been responsible to go to Croydon before. She's been responsible to go on trains and buses and trams and everything before on her own.
So when she walked past you and out to the door, did she say anything?
She said, goodbye. Well, I said, well, make sure you're back at 6. She went, yeah. And that was it, and then the door closed and she walks out. I don't take precise times and things like that, but when she walked out that door, I know damn well it was 12:10, according to my clock, because as I was hoovering up the dog's mess by my kitchen, I look up and I've got a great big clock in front of me on the cooker, which says 12:10.
Now listen, you've been living in house arrest,
basically,
almost, for the last 7 days almost now. How's that been?
Oh, it's been horrible. It's been horrible. Do you know what I mean? The family's, we're stuck inside here, do you know what I mean? We've got all the papers outside, all putting accusations down, and they asked me stupid questions yesterday, like, oh, did you do anything? I said, well, no, I didn't. Excuse my language, but no, I didn't. I'd never think of that. I'd loved her to bits. She's like my own daughter, for God's sake. We had that sort of relationship. It was that sort of thing. It was just, you know, she wanted it, she got it. She's got a loving home. She's never gone without anything, so I can't work it out. What the hell's going on? We're all out there, they want to report the truth.
So do you feel under pressure? Do you feel that perhaps the people are looking at you?
Well, if they believe what they read in the papers, they can do whatever they like, because I know deep down in my heart that Tia walked out of my house. She walked out there, and I know damn well, because she was seen walking down the pathway. I know she made that track down to that way. What happened after that is, I don't know.
He painted a picture of a normal, affectionate relationship, positioning himself as a protective figure, a step, grandfather caught in a living nightmare. This performance was chillingly effective. To the millions watching at home, he appeared to be just another member of a heartbroken family, desperate for answers. He seemed to be one of them, a pillar of support for Tia's distraught grandmother, Christine, who clung to his arm during press conferences. His deception went beyond interviews. Hazel threw himself into the public search efforts with conspicuous enthusiasm. He joined the local volunteers, wearing a t-shirt emblazoned with Tia's face, and tramped through the same woods and parks as everyone else. He gave advice, pointed out areas to search, and spoke with other volunteers about his hopes for her safe return. This active participation was a masterstroke of manipulation. It deflected any possible suspicion and reinforced his image as a man doing everything in his power to find the little girl he claimed to love. He was hiding in plain sight, his grief, a performance so convincing that it fooled an entire community, the police, and a national television audience. Looking back, there were subtle, jarring notes in his behavior. Some observers noted he seemed almost too calm, too composed for a person whose loved one was missing. In one interview, he casually described the police search of the house, remarking, "They've turned my house upside down." There was no anger, no frustration in his tone, just a flat, detached observation. While Natalie's pleas were raw with emotion, Hazel's were articulate and measured, as if rehearsed. But at the time, these were just fleeting impressions, easily dismissed amidst the chaos and hope of the search. He was, after all, the last person to see her. His story was the foundation of the entire investigation, and for 7 agonizing days, almost no one thought to question the storyteller. The quiet anxiety of the first night quickly erupted into a full-scale mobilization. The search for Tia Sharp was no longer confined to her frantic family. It became the single, unifying mission of the entire New Addington community. A ripple of concern became a tidal wave of action. Neighbors who barely knew each other now stood side by side, united by a common purpose. An army of ordinary people, parents, shopkeepers, teenagers fanned out across the estate, their determination a powerful testament to the community's spirit. This grassroots effort was soon matched by a massive police operation. More than 80 officers were assigned to the case, and the area was swarmed with a sea of high-visibility jackets.
The family want Tia home. They miss her dreadfully, and I wanted to assure you of all the work the Met is doing, and we are doing everything we can, everything we possibly can to find her and trying to support the family at this time. Let me give you a sense of the scale of the inquiry at present. I have had Olympic resources redirected to help in the search for Tia, and over the last 3 days or so, that has meant more than 100 extra uniform officers in the Croydon and Mitcham areas. There are over 80 officers working on this case, 40 of them detectives, 40 of them specialist search officers. We've collected more than 800 hours so far of CCTV footage from buses, from trams, and we've viewed more than 120 hours of that CCTV in live time, and that continues round the clock. I would also like to thank everybody in the Croydon and Mitcham communities that has helped with the investigation so far. I spent time with councillors and with members of the Pathfinders charity on the New Addington estate yesterday evening. I was completely moved by their generosity, their energy and commitment. We were stopped many times on the way to and from by people handing out leaflets showing Tia, and to everyone who is doing that, I wanted to say thank you and please continue to look for her. Can I once again thank every member of the public who has phoned into the incident room. The Met's priority at this time is to find Tia safe and well.
Specialist search teams, accompanied by sniffer dogs, were deployed. The green expanse of Furze Wood, a large patch of woodland bordering the estate, became the focal point of their efforts. For days, officers meticulously combed through the dense undergrowth, searching for any sign, any clue, a dropped item, a scrap of clothing that might lead them to Tia. The whir of a police helicopter overhead became a constant, almost hopeful sound above the houses of the Lindens. Simultaneously, the Find Tia campaign exploded. Her smiling face, frozen in a school photograph, was taped to every surface. It looked out from shop windows, bus shelters, and car dashboards. Yellow ribbons, a symbol of hope for the safe return of a missing person, began to appear, tied to railings and trees throughout the estate. The media coverage was relentless. Tia's story led the national news bulletins every night. Her mother, Natalie's tearful pleas, and her estranged father, Stephen Carter's emotional appeal for his little girl to come home, were broadcast to millions. The nation was captivated and united in hope. Donations poured in to support the search. Strangers traveled to New Addington to join the volunteer lines. For a week, it felt as though the entire country was holding its breath, collectively willing Tia to be found safe. The dominant theory, the one everyone clung to, was that she had been abducted by a stranger. It was a terrifying thought, but one that allowed for the possibility of a rescue, of a happy ending. No one, not the police, not the public, and not her desperate family searching the woods, considered the possibility that the answer to her disappearance lay just feet away from where the entire search was being coordinated. They were all looking in the wrong place. Number 20. The Lindens had become the unlikely heart of the search for Tia Sharp. It was where her grandmother Christine waited, where family gathered to console one another, and where news crews aimed their cameras, hoping for an update. The small, terraced house was the central hub of a community's hope. It was also a crime scene, hiding its terrible secret in plain sight. The police, of course, had been inside. Not once, but 4 separate times in the week following Tia's disappearance. The first visit, on Saturday, August 4th, was little more than a cursory check. Officers walked through the house, but their focus was on corroborating Stuart Hazel's story. They were searching for clues about where Tia might have gone, not where she might be. The house was cluttered and messy, and nothing immediately seemed out of place. Hazel, the calm and cooperative witness, controlled the environment, guiding them through the rooms of the home he had meticulously tidied. A second search was conducted the next day. Again, it was not a full forensic examination. the mindset of the investigation was still fixed on an external abduction. The police were operating under the assumption that the family were victims, not suspects. As the week progressed, however, a strange, persistent odor began to permeate the house. Family members who visited noticed it, describing it as a deeply unsettling smell. They mentioned it to Hazel. He had an answer for that too. He claimed he had cooked a big roast dinner days before and had left a bag of spoiled meat in the loft, promising to clear it out. It was a plausible, if unpleasant, explanation that was readily accepted. Even a third search by a specialist dog team failed to raise the alarm. The prevailing belief was that Tia was alive, and the efforts were concentrated on the world outside the front door. The house on the Lindens was treated as a sterile base of operations, not a place of suspicion. Officers came and went, taking statements and offering support, all while the evidence they so desperately sought lay just a few feet above their heads. The attic, accessible only through a small hatch in the ceiling, was cramped and packed with the accumulated junk of years. It was an afterthought. No one had a reason to perform the difficult task of climbing up and sifting through the debris. For 7 days, the house was a paradox, the place where their missing child was hidden. While hundreds of people searched the nearby woods with desperate hope, the truth of her fate lay hidden in the darkness of the loft. By Thursday, August 9th, the veneer of normalcy inside 20 The Lindens was beginning to crack. For a week, Christine Bicknell had clung to the hope that her granddaughter was alive, and to the man who promised he was doing everything to find her. But hope was being suffocated by a creeping unease. The unpleasant smell in the house was getting worse, becoming overwhelming that Hazel's story about spoiled meat could no longer explain away. It clung to the furniture, the curtains, and the air itself. Christine watched her partner. She saw the man who performed for the cameras, the concerned step-grandfather. But in the quiet moments, away from the public gaze, she saw something else. She saw a calmness that felt unnatural, a detachment that bordered on cold. His story, once so plausible, now felt flimsy. The details he offered seemed too polished, too rehearsed. The lie, held together by sheer audacity, was starting to fray at the edges. A grandmother's intuition, a primal instinct that something was terribly wrong within her own home, began to overpower her loyalty to her partner. The breaking point came. The exact conversation is lost to the privacy of that house. But the outcome was decisive. Overcome with a dreadful suspicion she could no longer ignore, Christine Bicknell picked up the phone and called the police. She told them she didn't believe Hazel's story anymore. She told them about the smell. Her call transformed the house from a base of operations into the primary focus of the investigation. On Friday, August 10th, exactly 1 week after Tia was last seen, police officers returned to the Lindens. This time, their approach was different. The sympathetic support was gone, replaced by a grim, methodical determination. They were no longer searching for clues about where Tia had gone. They were searching the house itself, top to bottom, with the assumption that they had been deceived. The team was led by a detective who, frustrated by the lack of progress and stung by the possibility of a catastrophic police error, was determined to get a definitive answer. They would not leave until every inch of the property had been examined. The search began, methodical and slow, moving through the now familiar rooms. But this time, all eyes were drawn upwards, towards the small, unassuming hatch in the landing ceiling that led to the loft. The atmosphere inside 20 The Lindens had transformed. The chaotic, hopeful energy of the past week had evaporated, replaced by a heavy clinical silence. Family members were escorted from the property, their anxious questions met with grim, non-committal answers. The house was now sealed, a sterile zone under the complete control of the police. Their focus was singular, their purpose unwavering, and it was directed at the ceiling of the first-floor landing. An officer placed a ladder beneath the loft hatch. With each step he climbed, the strong, unpleasant smell intensified, confirming their worst fears. This was not the smell of forgotten food. Pushing open the hatch, the officer was met by a wall of stale, hot air and darkness. He pulled himself up into the cramped, low-ceiling space, his torch beam cutting through the gloom, illuminating a chaotic jumble of old boxes, discarded toys, and forgotten belongings. For a moment, he saw nothing but clutter. Then, his light swept across something that didn't belong. Tucked away in the eaves, partially concealed beneath other items, was a large, bulky object. There was no need for a closer look. The officer knew instantly what he had found. A quiet, terse message was relayed over the police radio. The search for Tia Sharp was over. The words, spoken in the clipped, professional tone of law enforcement, carried a devastating weight that would soon be felt across the country. The search for Tia Sharp was over. Outside, the news spread like a shockwave. The yellow ribbons of hope that adorned the estate suddenly looked like monuments to a terrible, collective delusion. The crowds that had gathered daily to offer support now stood in stunned, horrified silence. Cries of disbelief turned to sobs of anguish. The hope that had united a community and a nation was brutally extinguished in an instant. Tia was not in some stranger's car or a faraway house. She had been in her grandmother's home all along, just feet from where her family wept and prayed. The investigation pivoted with stunning speed. This was no longer a missing person inquiry. It was a homicide. A murder scene was established, and forensic teams in white suits began the grim task of carefully processing the scene in the attic. The house on the Lindens had finally given up its secret. And with that discovery came one immediate, urgent question. Where was Stuart Hazel? The man who had orchestrated the deception, who had stood before them all and lied, had slipped away just before the police arrived for their final, fateful search. He was now the most wanted man in Britain. As forensic specialists began their grim work in the attic of 20 the Lindens, a new, urgent alarm was raised. Stuart Hazel was gone. He had vanished, just as the net was closing in, slipping out of the house and melting into the sprawling suburbs of South London. The man who had performed for the cameras and searched alongside volunteers was now a fugitive and the focus of a frantic, nationwide manhunt. His face, so recently seen on posters pleading for Tia's return, was now broadcast across every news channel, this time with a stark warning. He was wanted for murder. The manhunt, however, was intense but brief. Hazel didn't get far. Later that same day, on the afternoon of Friday, August 10th, he was spotted by members of the public near Mordenhall Park, a leafy oasis in the borough of Merton, miles from the crime scene. A schoolgirl recognized his distinctive, shaven head from the news reports and raised the alarm. Police swarmed the area. They found him walking aimlessly, a man seemingly with nowhere left to run. He was arrested without a struggle, his hands cuffed behind his back. The public performance was over. Stripped of his audience and his lies, he was just a suspect in police custody.
So what can you tell me about the murder of Tia Sharp, Stuart? Stuart?
Well, a couple of minutes with my solicitor, please.
Okay.
Just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that's no problem. It's 1:10. We'll stop the tapes and we'll leave the room and give you a chance to have a chat.
Faced with the irrefutable truth, he abandoned his denials and offered a new, desperate fiction. He confessed, but it was not a confession to murder. It was a self-serving, pathetic story designed to mitigate his guilt. He claimed Tia's death had been a tragic accident. He told detectives she had suffered a fatal fall down the stairs. In his version of events, he had panicked. Fearing he would be blamed because of his criminal record, he made the stupid decision to conceal her remains in the attic instead of calling for help. He claimed he had intended to give her a proper burial later, once things had calmed down. It was a desperate, cowardly lie, a final attempt to control the narrative. They knew the truth would not be found in his words, but in the forensic evidence they were carefully gathering from the place of concealment he had made in the attic. The trial of Stuart Hazel began in May 2013 at the historic Central Criminal Court, better known as the Old Bailey. As he stood in the dock, Hazel initially maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty to murder. His defense rested entirely on the fragile, self-serving story he had concocted in the interrogation room. That Tia's death was a tragic accident, a fall down the stairs, and that all his subsequent actions were the result of pure panic. It was a narrative designed to paint him as a fool, not a monster. But the prosecution was ready to dismantle it, piece by devastating piece. The Crown's case was overwhelming. The prosecution then turned to Hazel's own behavior, playing his television interviews to the jury. They contrasted the image of the concerned step-grandfather, pleading for Tia's return with the chilling reality that he knew she was already dead, her body hidden just feet above where some of those interviews took place. The prosecutor described his deception as an act of breathtaking cynicism. Then came the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. Evidence so conclusive, it sealed his fate. On Hazel's mobile phone, detectives had discovered evidence on his phone that revealed his true motive. This evidence directly contradicted his story of an accident. This single discovery annihilated any claim of panic. It proved his motive was not fear, but a dark and calculated motive. It showed his actions following her death were not driven by a clumsy attempt to hide an accident, but by a calculated effort to conceal the true nature of his crime. On the 5th day of the trial, just as the jury was about to be presented with this damning evidence, Hazel's defense collapsed. Knowing the profound and damning impact the image would have, he instructed his lawyers to change his plea. In a moment of high drama, Stuart Hazel stood before the court and finally uttered the word, guilty. He admitted to murdering Tia Sharp. The judge, Mr. Justice Nickel, delivered a sentence that reflected the profound horror of the crime. He told Hazel that his late confession was nothing more than a recognition of the overwhelming evidence against him. Labeling his lies to the family and the police as wicked, the judge sentenced Stuart Hazel to life in prison, ordering that he must serve a minimum of 38 years before he could even be considered for parole. Justice, in the eyes of the law, had been served. The man who had deceived a nation was locked away, ensuring he would likely never walk free again. The conviction of Stuart Hazel brought a legal end to the case, but it did not quiet the storm of questions that hung over New Addington. Once the trial was over, a wave of public anger and disbelief crashed down, directed not at the killer, but at the police. The community that had worked tirelessly, searching woods and distributing posters, felt a profound sense of betrayal. They had poured their hearts into finding a little girl who was never actually missing in the way they had been led to believe. She was in the house. How could the police have missed her? 4 times? The question echoed in newspaper headlines and television debates across the country. The story of the dismissed smell, the cursory searches, and the unwavering focus on an external abductor became a case study in procedural failure. In the face of this intense outcry, the Metropolitan Police did something rare and necessary. They publicly apologized. Commander Neil Basu, speaking on behalf of the force, offered a frank admission of their error. He apologized unreservedly for the distress and anguish caused to Tia's family by the delay in finding her body. He explained it as a tragic consequence of human error and an initial assumption that the family were purely victims, which blinded officers to the possibility that the home itself was the crime scene. Tia's case became a grim but vital lesson, forcing a painful reevaluation of police search protocols. The tragedy led to significant changes in how missing person cases, particularly those involving children, are handled. The last known location of a missing person is now treated with a much higher degree of forensic suspicion from the outset. The assumption of family innocence is no longer allowed to preclude an immediate and painstakingly thorough search of the primary property, including every cramped and cluttered loft space. But beyond the headlines, the trial, and the official reviews, there is the memory of Tia herself, a memory her family fights to keep separate from the horror of her death. They remember the bubbly, bright-eyed girl who loved to laugh and spend time at her nan's house. They remember the daughter, granddaughter, and friend, not the victim. The yellow ribbons that once fluttered with desperate hope throughout New Addington eventually came down, but their meaning lingered. They were no longer symbols of a frantic search, but a quiet, heartbreaking tribute to the girl in the attic. A reminder of the community that loved her and the smiling child who had been right there all along.